Now, yes, you read the title correctly. I am a photographer in 2021 and I don't shoot wide open. Let's see the comments down below and see how this goes. What is going on, everybody? My name is Finn Badgley. If you're new around here, I am a commercial fashion and portrait photographer. And yes, I do not shoot wide open, or rather, I rarely do. Now, this is not because maybe I don't have the fastest lenses or anything like that. This is more so my personal style and what I like and what the work that I shoot demands. Now, I know in the age of Instagram and portrait mode and everything like that, we all love that creamy, blurry background, that nice bokeh, but sometimes you want a little bit of information in the background so you can tell what's going on. And that is the reason most of the time I actually don't shoot wide open for the majority of my photos. Pretty much everything that you've seen on this channel, whether it be behind the scenes or anything like that, the majority of all of it is not shot wide open. It may come as a surprise to some, especially when you see people shooting at 1.4, 1.2 and just trying to get all that bokeh in there, but I am just not that type of person. For me, a lot of my work, the background is a very contextual part of what is happening in the shot, and I like to have a little more depth and information in there, which is why I'll usually stop down to anywhere from f3.2 to even f5.6 in some cases. This still gives me a bit of a blur in the background, so that way there's a nice subject separation, but it isn't completely blown out and you don't have any context as to what is going on. Now, obviously, the effect of shooting wide open will differ depending on the lens that you are shooting with, obviously, but whether it is a wide lens or a tight lens, I usually like to have a little bit of information in the background in there. Now, sometimes a project or anything will call for having that nice blurry depth of field, and that is definitely when I would shoot wide open, 1.8, 1.4, 1.2, anything like that. But the majority of all my photos simply aren't, and there's a couple reasons for this. Mainly it's because I like the context of what's going on in the background and how it relates to the actual story, and it just draws you in a little bit more and it gives a better feel of what's going on. It tells the story a little bit better. Even if that background is blurred a little bit when you're shooting at like f5.6, even 6.3, anything like that, you can still figure out what's going on in the background. It'll be just blurry enough unless you're shooting at like 16 millimeters or something like that, but then everything's all distorted and then it's all weird and wonky, and that's not usually how I shoot. Anyways, usually I'm anywhere from 35 millimeters to 85. I like that nice sweet spot there. Sometimes I'll go longer if it's a specific shot, or sometimes I'll go wider again if it's a specific kind of scenario, but the most part lives within that 35 to 85 range. And because of that, I like having a little more information in the background, even if I am wider out at the 35 millimeter range. Something like this shot here, you will see this actually wasn't taken using a super wide depth of field. This is shot at f4 or 5.6. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. I'll write it with the image description up here so you can know for certain, but you can see the background is still nice and blurred, but you still have context as to what is going on. Now, the second reason as to why I'll typically stop down a little bit is that lenses are a little bit sharper when you actually stop down. If you're wide open, typically that's when a lens is at its softest. No matter what piece of glass you're shooting on, pretty much they're all going to be a little softer once you get completely wide open. And usually if I'm shooting anything fashion oriented or anything like that, I want to have a little more in focus anyways. So that's why I'll stop down, both for the added sharpness and for that added bit of the story element in there, which is probably the most important part in my personal opinion. If you don't have that context of what's going on, you don't have as much of a story in the photo, and then it just doesn't land quite as well. Now, some of the images that you've seen were also shot on the 24-105 f4 lens. Now, these were wide open, and that's kind of where that stopping down to increase sharpness thing, it falls flat a little bit. And this is just me trying not to be a hypocrite or anything like that. I will shoot sometimes wide open on this lens, but that said, it's still an f4, so I still get that information in the background. If it were an f2.8 or an f2 or anything like that, the only real reason I would shoot at 2.8 or f2, anything like that, is if, for one, the client or whoever I'm shooting with or that project lended itself to having a blurrier background, in which case that's exactly what I would do. Or two, if I'm in a really low light scenario and don't want to crank my ISO too much. Now, I have been on shoots in the past with clients and that kind of thing where they want that nice creamy depth of field, and by all means at that point I am going to shoot wide open because they want that in there, so that's what I'm going to give to them. But that said, I've also had clients where they want that blurry depth of field in there, but then they will see the images after the fact and think that there wasn't quite enough of the background scene there, that too much of it is out of focus, and maybe it would be better to stop down. So that's why also sometimes I'll take a couple different exposures, adjusting my aperture to make sure that if the background is important to the photo, that I get that in there. Now, obviously with different focal lengths, this will change your depth of field. Like we all know, the closer you get with a wider lens, all that kind of stuff, it's going to change up what is and isn't in focus, but this is just my general rule. And to show all of you that you don't need to go out and spend thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on these 1.2 lenses, especially if you're not going to be shooting at f1.2 all the time. Like I said, I am a working professional, and about 90% of the time, if not 95, 99% of the time, I always will stop down a little bit, just so that way I have the context for the story, and sometimes if I want the image to be a little bit sharper. Now, with all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got some value out of it. Maybe it helped you look at your own work and how you can add some story in there, or maybe it just kind of showed you that you don't need to do what everyone else is doing and shoot at all these really wide apertures. Now, with that said, leave a comment if you like this kind of thing, if you want to see more of it from me in the future. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell to be notified when I post new videos. Work hard, rest often, and as always, I will see you on the next one.